Hey, everybody. Y'all want to join me?
Good evening.
Hey.
Hey,
I'm just going to introduce everybody and come on in. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this evening's webinar on the invisible man and the erasure of fathers. My name is Mia. I use she, her pronouns. And I usually would do an introduction and talk about all my accolades and all of the things. But for this, I'm not going to do that because this is not about me. Today I'm just going to be a daughter and a listener because today we're going to talk about fathers. So I got my guy behind me, my dad, just because I think it's really important to make spaces for voices that are not mom voices in a lot of spaces. So before we get started, I first want to say thank you to all of you all to you gentlemen for coming and sharing with us and being vulnerable and giving us everything from your experiences to hopefully help make us better people, better listeners, better moms, better dads out there, better support systems, practitioners, whatever space we occupy. We thank you for using your experiences to make us better. So thank you up front. If you all want to take a minute and just introduce yourselves, let us know who you are on your dad journey. So we will start with, I'm gonna start on my screen. So I'm gonna go to Joseph first.
Good evening, everyone. It is a privilege and an honor to be with you tonight. My name is Joseph Tucker Edmonds. I am from Baltimore, Maryland, but I currently reside in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am a brother and a father and a husband. I have one daughter that is just made and changed and transformed my life. But and other than being a father, I'm also a professor who works and thinks about the relationship between Black men and culture and religion and how all of those things come together. And I do a lot of work thinking about and hopefully embracing the idea that Black men and their emotional, cultural, and social well-being is something that we need to be talking about, thinking about, imagining new possibilities around. And hopefully tonight, that will be something that we can do so that we can not only continue our journeys as fathers and brothers and husbands, but that we can supercharge this journey and do something that's going to change the culture. So I'm excited to be here, folks. I'm excited.
I almost started running in here. Almost started running. All right, we're gonna go to Mark with a C. It's gonna be with the C.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Mark Campbell, born and raised in Chicago. I've been blessed and fortunate to have moved all over the country. I currently reside in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm the proud father of two adult kids. I affectionately refer to them as adult kids. They're 30 and 28, but they're still my kids and they still require parenting and advice and counsel, and but they're fun to hang out with when they become adults. And so love them to death. I'm glad to be part of this panel. With my children, I was a single father after my divorce. And so we had a great journey, and we've had some challenges along the way. And hopefully we can sort of tap into that and share some things, and folks can come away with just some nuggets of wisdom, if you will, just as we go forward and navigate life.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go next to Adrian. Adrian is next on my screen.
Hey, everybody. My name is Adrian Boone. I currently reside in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm from Evansville, Indiana. I'm the father to two beautiful children. My oldest is 9, my youngest is 3. I just really enjoy being a father. Fatherhood is something that's very important to me. I'm currently a project manager. I work in the 401k space where I help implement 401k plans. And outside of that, I actually sit on the board for a nonprofit where I work with Black youth here in the town that I currently reside in. And I'm able to serve in that father figure area for a lot of boys that I work with, as well as coaching my son's football team, where I'm able to serve in that position for a lot of boys as well. So fatherhood is something that's very important to me, something that I hold near and dear to my heart. So I'm really appreciative for you guys allowing me to join you and join this discussion with you guys.
Thank you, Adrian. And last but not least, we got David joining us. David, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Mia. Everyone, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. Good evening, good afternoon. I'm a father, I'm a son, brother, and a husband. And I thought it was important Joseph kicked us off with that. But telling you a little bit about myself, I was born in Philly, I saw that out there. Raised in Virginia, went to Omaha, Nebraska, where I spent most of my trade. I'm an attorney by trade. I would tell you that I was a prosecutor for many years in Omaha, Nebraska, which is an important part of my story, especially as being a Black prosecutor in a place that is predominantly, I'm not the predominant, unless it's we as defendants and the like, right? And so working through that, but I thought it was impactful and important for me to help make a difference in my community and also make sure that the right thing was occurring. So I'm a father to 2 young men, 21 and 23 years old. I'm currently a chief compliance officer, but one of the other pieces I would tell you about my career is that I fast forward, I had the opportunity to go to Malaysia to deal with an arbitration. And I looked up and I realized it was the first time I was in a courtroom where everyone was a person of color, which really impactful to me because I had been very experienced at that time. And it was so impactful and unusual to everybody else that I made the statement that we got a picture. And so that was really important to me. My mom and dad got divorced when I was at a young age. She's a single mom, working 2 jobs. And so I have a deep understanding of hard work and the sacrifice that moms and parents make for their children. But wanted to share that with you. Appreciate us being on this journey for the next 45 or so. And really my piece of my message is just to help others to be seen as they go on their journey. So thank you, Mia.
Thank you all. We're gonna hop right into it because I got some good questions and I want y'all to get to them and give the people some words today, give them some nuggets, give us something to think about, as we navigate this journey and, you know, continue to work with you in collaboration with you to make space for you and ensure that in our spaces that we are moving out the way, right, for you all, because your voices are important. So the title of this webinar is The Invisible Man, right, the erasure of fathers. And I just want to know, like, just right off the bat, can you remember the first time that somebody made you feel invisible or like a bystander in your child's life? Like in something, a decision with your child or anything, just in the rearing of your child, what was the first time that you really remember feeling like, oh, y'all not checking for me? So for you, this don't have nothing to do with me. Got you. Okay. When was that time? Anybody can start. I just want to know that.
So we're also respectful, I think, of each other. So I'll go real quick. And mine was from the start. We all know there's not a book about this, or any book doesn't really prepare you for it. But as my wife and I went in, we're both afraid. It's our first ultrasound appointment. And absolutely, it is all about her and the baby. But I recognize that. But during no part of it was I seen or talked to. And eventually my wife looked over at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" Because I'm just standing there frozen. And think about it, I'm a prosecutor, a litigator during the course of my career, a negotiator and the like. And I said, "Is the baby okay?" Right? So we don't know anything about this process. And for me, of course, they talked to my wife, and this is what's going to happen, and this will feel cold initially, and all of that. But it was just, is everything okay? And I had to ask her that, because otherwise, and I tried, right? But the doctor at the time didn't really see me or talk to me, and I get it, but there's also two people in the room. So and it just continued from there until we got to our pediatrician. We found the right pediatrician and we went forward.
So I know myself, one situation that really comes to mind when you kind of mentioned that is also in the area of healthcare. I know when my wife was actually pregnant and about to deliver our daughter a few years ago, I had a situation to where, you know, she ended up having to have an emergency C-section. So, you know, she's trying to give vaginal birth in the beginning, and they're making all these decisions for her where, okay, well, now we have to give her an epidural. We're having to give her an emergency C-section and all these different things, man. And they rush her in the back of the room, and I'm not even knowing what's going on. You know, I'm trying to ask people, you know, hey, can you answer this question for me? Can you tell me what's going on? I'm not sure if they even know that I'm her husband or what, but, you know, they're kind of just not really paying me any attention. I realized my wife, she's had 2 emergency C-sections. So I kind of knew what to expect with this second one, but this one kind of lasted a lot longer than what it had been with my son. So I want to say about an hour or 2 had passed, and they're still working on her. And you know, they're saying she's losing a lot of blood, and I'm just like, hey, you know, what's going on? Is she going to be okay? You know, and nobody's really answering any questions for me. They take my daughter and they clean her up, and, you know, they're still working on my wife and things like that. And they get me out of the room because they're still having to work on her without ever telling me anything at all. And I remember, and she had my daughter sometime in the evening. I remember a few short hours later, after my wife is still sedated, I'm sure she's heavily drugged. We have 2 individuals with the hospital. I'm not sure if they were doctors or what. They weren't the ones that delivered the baby, but they came in and they pretty much gave us an ultimatum with me in the room. And they're like, hey, you know, we had some complications with the delivery. You know, we went in there, we found some stuff from your previous C-section, and it doesn't look good. Like we don't think that you should have any more kids. So your husband's, we don't want to go in and tie your tubes because it's too dangerous. So your husband's gonna have to get a C-section. And they're like, what do you think about that? And not looking at me at all. I'm like, you're literally talking about me, and I'm right here. And they're like, well, you know, you're gonna have to make a decision before you leave because we're scared to send you home, blah, blah, blah. So the next morning they came in again, and they're like, hey, so have you decided, you know, what you're gonna do? You know, is your husband gonna have a vasectomy? I apologize. she's gonna have a vasectomy, or kind of what route do you guys want to take there? And still not even addressing me when I'm in the room as her husband and as a father of her children. I'm like, you're literally talking to me about getting a procedure done and not even looking at me. So that was probably one of the main key things that I think about when that comes to mind. Is like literally somebody's telling me what I should do to my body without actually addressing it to me. So that's something that came to mind. So I appreciate you sharing that, David.
My first experience is a little different. It actually, and so full disclosure, my 30-year-old daughter is on this call. So I don't know that I've ever told her or shared this story. So the very first time it happened with me was a good friend who was a couple of years older. And he said to me, my ex-wife was pregnant with our daughter. And he said to me, he said, hey, look, don't be surprised when your daughter's born and she doesn't want to come to you and she just want to be with her mom, and that they have this special connection, and you're kind of on the outside looking in, and because that's what dads do, and you go hunt and do all that other stuff, but your child they're going to have this bond. And it was in that moment, and Mia, when you asked the question, I was thinking about something else, but it was in that moment when you asked the question that when he said that to me, I knew that my role was to make sure that I had that connection with my daughter and with my son. But my daughter was born first, and just ensuring that she was going to be as connected to me, her dad, as she was to her mom, and she could, she would feel my heartbeat the same way that she would feel her mom's heartbeat, and it would be interchangeable. And so I didn't think about it at the time. I think he was imparting some wisdom based on what he knew or what he had experienced, but I didn't want my world, my experience, my narrative to be that. And so my goal was to ensure that I was always hands-on and engaged with my kids. And as things happen, it just played out that way up until about 2 hours ago when I was having a conversation with my daughter. I'm still connected to her. So yeah, that was my first experience.
And, Mark, I'm going to follow right up on that, because I was going to give an example too of talking to some of the elders in my community, and I had my baby on my chest and I'm carrying her around. We're at a cookout, and the comment that came from some of them was that, why are you holding that baby so much? And in a way trying to shame or course correct a certain type of masculinity, a certain type of relationship to parenting and nurturing. And immediately I felt, like you said, a little bit invisible. I felt that either I needed to change my behavior, right, to hand my child who I loved and cared for back to my wife or back to another woman in that room, or make a claim just like you did, Mark, and say, no, this is the version of fatherhood. This is the version of parenting that I'm committed and engaged and invested in creating. And I want to be visible in this way. I'm not going to hide that. I want to make that present. And that has shown up over and over again, because I remember even also in some of the well child visits, some of the nurses would say, oh, dad is here again. And I'm like, what you mean again? Like, I'm gonna be at every visit. I'm coming to all these visits, and so it is this question about how we take some of these maybe antiquated or older or more traditional roles or understandings about fatherhood and push back a little bit. So I appreciate you saying that, Mark. And that was a similar experience that I had as well.
Not the nurses, like, well, what is he doing here? Why he keep showing up? Why
exactly
in here? Thank you. Cause listen, I'm sitting here like, well, wait up, because I've seen it and I hear it, but it's like a thing to like hear it and hear it and hear it again. I had another question. I was listening, I was reading this article and they were talking about fatherhood and like kind of feeling like you're not as important during, a lot of different steps and processes and things like that. And one of the guys in the article said something about the idea that like a lot of people equate the word parent to moms. Like when you say parent, like, oh, so-and-so's parent is going to come to the school today. everybody automatically assumes, oh, so mom is going to be coming, or, you know, so-and-so's parent is going to drop them off. Mom is dropping them off, right? And oftentimes that puts dads into this observer category in people's mind, like, because you're not the parent, because the parent is mom. So I'm not even a so does that kind of thought process, does that idea ring true to you? Kind of why, if it does or doesn't, can you tell me about that? I'm gonna go to Joseph first, because I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that rings true. I mean, I always think about this notion, you know, the movie Daddy Daycare or something like that, that when daddies are at home doing the work, we've got to give another name to it. It's daycare. It is they're babysitting. They are outside of the norm in some way, rather than that is a custodial or maybe even a non-custodial parent doing the thing that they're supposed to do as a father, right? And so I do think we run into this idea that when we are talking about the normative character or quality of the parent, that we're thinking about the mom, right? You know, who knows the birth dates, who knows the birth records, who know, you know, those kinds of things we associate with the mom. And there's a scholar that I work with here at Indiana University, a pediatrician who has written about this. He talks about thinking beyond the mother-child dyad. Name is Levi Funches. And he does this work that he says that not only do we need to think beyond it in the way that we're talking about tonight, the presence, the responsibility, the activity of the dad as a fully embodied, fully connected parent, but in his research, he argues that the dad is a protective feature in terms of the maternal well-being and the child's well-being during birth, that when dads are in the room, when dads are praying, when dads are around, we see this. And so if we're going to talk about well births and child rearing, we need that whole family system and structure. And we need to talk about the dad as an integral part of that team and that community.
As a parent.
As a parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Come on, parent.
Yes.
Anybody else have a thought about that? I want to make up some space for.
Yeah, I know myself, man. Even today, I still experience some situations where, you know, I kind of do feel invisible. I know, you know, for one example, you know, my son just ended school maybe a week or two ago, and I had been picking him up from school all year long. But every time I pick him up, they ask for my ID. Like, do you have an ID? You know, are you uncle, or you know, who are you? Like, no, I'm his dad. But I've driven with my wife before for her to pick him up, and they never asked for our ID. I'm just like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, y'all see me here all the time. Y'all still need my ID. So that situation there, and then one that honestly used to bother me, and now we just laugh about it, is when my wife used to have to go out of town for work, or she had to be out of town for an extended period of time or overnight or something like that. My mother-in-law lives 2 hours away, and every time that my wife was going out of town, my mother-in-law would, you know, in the beginning would be like, oh well, I'll come in town, I'll drive 2 hours and do this, and so I can watch them. So Adrian, you know, but eventually I had to tell, like, look, I'm the father. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm the dad, like, I can do it. Like, I'm not just babysitting them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not their roommate. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Their big brother. Like, I am their father. Like, I'm fine. You do not have to drive up here. So kind of the next to the point is like, yes, I do feel like there's a sense where a lot of us feel invisible a lot of the time, you know. But I think it's still important that we continue to keep showing up. You know, we continue to be that figure for our children, and eventually and hopefully, you know, things start to change for us, especially with the work that Dr. Tucker Edmonds is doing, and some of his colleagues.
So I grew up with there were a lot of women in my family. I had a lot of mother figures in my family, you know, whether it was Big Mama or my aunts, my mom. There's just a lot of women, older cousins. But I didn't have a lot of male fathers to emulate. And, you know, part of my motivation as a parent, some of it was knowing just what I wanted to be, but the other part was knowing what I didn't want to be. And that was, I didn't want to be like my biological father, who was negligent in his parenting. And so most people are motivated with something positive. I had two things that was fueling my behaviors as a parent. And it was, again, not wanting to be like my dad, so I'm going to be polar opposite. and I would be hard on my kids sometimes, and like, you'll understand, but you know, I'm not, you may have other issues, but you're not gonna have daddy issues, right? And so we're gonna make sure that we stay connected in that way. And last thing I would say is I've sold more Girl Scout cookies than anybody in the United States.
Come on.
I you know, and that's just being connected, and that's not bragging, but it's being engaged with. Now, I also did the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts with my son, but it's being PTA president, but it's showing up in ways, Joseph, like you were saying, that's not necessarily the traditional things, right? So we're breaking some of the assumptions about who we are as men, and to some degree how masculinity is even defined as it relates to being a parent. And I never let that be a roadblock to me. I knew what I didn't want to be, which was what my biological father was, and I had enough women around me to say, this is what you need to be doing as a parent. So the combination of those two is what fueled me.
I'm gonna tell you right now, you got one up on me, because I got a whole grown child, and my son is 14, my daughter is 26. I ain't been to a PTA meeting ever in my life. Hello? Not going. I don't have time. I'm not doing it. So come on, President, Mr. President. It's gonna be a no for me. David, did you want to chime in on this one before I go to the next one? Because I don't want to leave you out.
I'm
You're
good.
okay?
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think
All
they
right.
covered it well.
Okay. So kind of on that same thing, you know, this idea that like caregivers are moms and things like that, you know, especially in our school spaces, I think it gets to I don't know who Adrian, were you the one who said that they asked you for ID? To that kind of point, right? Like this idea that you know, if something is going on, I'm gonna show up because I'm mom, of course, right? But then you show up at the school, and no matter how many times they've seen you, or it's always that look of like, well, why is he here? Something must have happened. How could he have time for this? Right? Like that idea of that you, and even to your point, Joseph, of like, well, he came to the last appointment. Why is he still here? Why he keeps showing up? How does this idea that you don't even belong in the spaces where your children are existing, how does that affect or impact your mental psyche around that relationship with your kids, but also the way that you're able to show up, and if you even want to show up in spaces? I'm going to start with David, since he didn't get around on it last.
So thank you, Mia. So for me, what I would tell you is I just keep moving forward with my kids, now young men, right? But one of the things, I think there was a question in the chat about what are some times where you felt validated as a father figure, or how do we validate, right? And what I would say is, I don't think we're looking for, hey, good job, pat on the back, right? Because that makes it seem like, well, what did you expect, right? It makes it that response. But what I would say is that it really is, to Adrian's point, Joseph, Mark's point, is that just see us, just talk to us and treat us as if we are part of this community, part of parenting and the like. It can be more subtle than like, hey, I appreciate you coming to school, right? I appreciate, because the other thing is that we also create a presence at the school, right? And so, but let's not make too big a deal about what we see as our duty, our obligation, our love for our children and the community we're in, right? So whether we're PTA or mentors going to the school, don't make a big deal about it, but see us, right? And I would also say that goes for the medical community, is it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just see who we are. And I would say, and it's okay to sort of get it wrong. Well, are you what brings you? How can I, right? Just engage us, and we'll get you past that awkward piece real quick, because we just want to be part of it.
I mean, I totally agree with that, Dave. I want to just jump in quickly too, because I think that one of the ways that we can affirm and continue to build this energy and this momentum is that we have to let dads and moms know that parenting is hard. It takes work.
Yeah.
It requires community, that, you know, that the work that we do comes with mistakes and stumbles, right, as along the way. And I think that some of the time that when men and when fathers and when dad figures are rendered invisible, it pushes against this idea that they can be a learner in this space, that they can make a mistake and keep moving. And I think that the way that we make this a space that's open and affirming for men is that we say, we see you, and we also are going to create space for you in all of the things that we do. I mean, sometimes that's a dad's reading club that, you know, maybe somebody might create. Sometimes that is birthing for dads, right? So that nurses and doulas might do, because yeah, dad is coming in there. I'm a little anxious. I don't know all the fluids that are going to be coming out. I like, maybe I want a refresher course before, or a beginner course before I go in there, right? And so sometimes acknowledging that, I think, can be really powerful. But I think that making men feel invisible almost makes them feel like either they shouldn't show up or they need to show up as perfect. And I think that we got to push back against the perfection trope, because we are all, you know, people and humans in training. And so we show up as fully as we can. And I think that's the way to get to kind of get more men to show up, is to let them know that we're learning and leaning and growing on one another.
Can I jump in real quick? Janet put something in how she allowed welcomed the father in to feel the heartbeat. Yes. What it triggered for me was I wasn't able to touch anything during the ultrasound, not my wife, nothing. And so, but that's how I felt, right? I could have gone over there, but I felt like, Janet, thank you for welcoming in. And I think that would have been just such a powerful experience for any father or person who's there to support, to be connected to the mom and the baby that way. So thanks. Sorry to jump in there, Mia.
Oh no, I wanna lean in a little bit into this medical piece for 1 second, because the space that I occupy, right, in my professional space, I work in a NICU, and oftentimes I talk about, you know, the reason that I help to support and, you know, kind of start this Fathers First initiative with one of our physicians, Black male doctor. We need more of you. Thank you and shout out to you. Come on, daughter. Is because I would often see, you know, the women have these babies, but it's always usually the dad who ends up coming over with the baby because mom has just had this baby, right? And I see these men who we just throw documents in their hands and they shaking like a leaf, terrified, right? Because it's a NICU. And no one has looked back at this person to explain to them anything. And they're just standing there scared. And I'm often like, hey, you're okay. I put a chair behind you. I want you to sit down and unlock your knees before you pass out, right? Like trying to talk them through and just talk to them and acknowledge them. And I wonder how the feeling of being invisible or feeling erased, especially in a medical setting, how does that impact the safety? Like how you think of safety in that space, not just for yourself, but for your loved one, whoever that woman is to you. I don't care if she's your wife, if she's your girlfriend, your ex-girlfriend, somebody you met last Thursday, it's not my business, right? Whoever she is to you, but also that baby. How does it affect the safety when we say, it's not you, we're not here for you, right? What does that bring up for you? I'm gonna go with Mark. Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. So in our family, we had a catastrophic accident, and my son is paralyzed from a car accident. And the process of navigating, and he went between two hospitals. So they should have life flighted him to the children's hospital, but they took him to the adult hospital. I don't want to call names. They took him to the adult hospital, which was right across the street from the children's hospital. And so it almost took a legislative act to get him moved from the adult hospital to the children's hospital, even though he was only 15. But then once we got to the hospital, the children's hospital, navigating the protocols as they stepped him down from ICU to rehab, and the step down from ICU to rehab just, was like three or four different floors that he was on and different levels of care. It was a struggle for his mom and me just to just navigate something that we were unfamiliar with. And so yeah, we felt invisible, we felt defeated, we felt confused, and we had to very quickly, his mom and I had to very quickly kind of tag team and understand how do we get through this and be his advocate. And we had to, and this kind of crept up where once we got into it, we noticed that the medical staff tended to talk to us as if we had an 8th grade education. And so we had to remind them most times in a polite way, but sometimes we had to be a little bit more terse that, his mom and I, we're pretty educated folks, and we can understand the conversation, but you got to have the conversation with us. And it's condescending when you talk down to us. But the flip side of that is I do understand that a lot of the people that the medical community may interact with may not be able to understand some of the long words and the prescriptions and the procedures. So I'm trying to be sensitive of their role, but at the end, I got to protect my son. And so it was really just engaging. The last thing I would say is my son was in the hospital for probably 3.5 months. And of those 3.5 months, he only spent maybe 4 nights by himself because there was someone there every night. And the 4 nights that we were there, I think he had just finally, he cussed us out and told us all to get out. He just needed, he just wanted to sleep by himself. But we were not going to let him be alone in that process. And so we quickly had to learn a lot. And in fact, in order for him to come home, we had to learn a lot of procedures so that we would be able to do them once he got home. And so, we walked out of there, getting these little certifications and whatnot. But it very, very difficult process when you have a catastrophic, situation like that.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. I want to open up space if anybody else wanted to.
I just saw one comment about the notion of, childbirth as a sacred space. And I want to affirm that, where women and birthing parents have power and agency, but I also think that when we are creating and maintaining a sacred space, we've got to realize that most sacred rituals come alongside with community. We practice and we prepare for sacred moments and sacred identity. We know who's going to pray. We know who's going to pour out the libations for the ancestors. We know who's going to be inside and who's going to be outside. And I think that as we are building a sacred entry for our babies, we want to be able to practice that and think about the role that everybody in the community plays. And that goes just back to any of these events, when we are in a catastrophic event or an event that is emergent, like childbirth, that we are preparing folks and getting folks ready. And so I think that when Black fathers and fathers come in, that they are coming in wanting to play their position and be in the right place and support that mother, you know what I'm saying? And support that sacred event, not take away from it, but to make sure that we are right where we're supposed to be. And part of that means we got to practice, we got to prepare, we got to talk to dad or uncle or grandfather, whoever's going to be in there, about what his role is. And that means all of us, nurses, doctors, have to do that. And so I'm excited about thinking more, even with my brothers here, about that, and with the folks on with us tonight.
Yes, I want to thank you for saying that, because I often think that sometimes we well-intended, right? I think intentions are so important. I think it's important to create that well-intended space. But I also think it's important to remember that sometimes in our well-intention, we create isolation, right? And we leave people by themselves on an island. And speaking as a person who sometimes is the one who gets left on the island because I'm separated from my community, from the people, right? The person that I need, like, this is my support person. Like, it's his baby too, right? And so when something goes wrong and it's like, Mom, what do you want to do? What do we want to do? He's sitting right here, right? I don't need to speak for him. And I think that gets really, really complicated because, you know, I don't want to speak for you. You're a grown man. You have a voice, right? So how do we support differently? How do we get out of the way, right? And make space for voices that are needed in that room when the voice is sitting right here and people are pretending they don't see it, whether it's in a doctor's office, at a parent-teacher conference meeting where they act like, well, what he doing here? It's for parents. He a parent. Came to the meeting because he in the title. You know, how do we make more space? What are some things that we could be, should be, can be doing? Anybody?
I think it's important, kind of like you said, to create more spaces for Black men to discover what it is to be a father. I think a lot of us, and myself included, had a tainted idea of what fatherhood would look like. I know myself growing up, just being transparent, growing up, I felt like my father wasn't there as much as I thought that he could be. Like, I played football my entire life, and when I think about, you know, the games that my father came to, I can remember two, I think, that he came to, and I just remember those because of each of the games that I remember. He made a funny joke before each game that I remember to this day. You know what I mean? And I never really remember him showing up for school stuff, but my father was in my life my entire life. So growing up, I thought my father wasn't there, and in my head, you know, I'm not going to be like my dad. But now that I'm older and I see that my dad worked hard for us, you know, he worked 2-3 jobs, you know, he worked, you know, 12, 16, 18-hour days, you know what I mean? He provided for us, you know, he was around, he reared us, you know, he disciplined us, you know what I mean? He spent the time that he could for us. So I think just understanding that fatherhood is not always going to look the same for one person as it does for everybody else, but understand that, like, what fatherhood looks for you, you just got to decide what that's going to look like. You know what I mean? So I guess I would say just create the conversation of for men to look at what healthy fatherhood looks like for them. And I know there's different ways that I've seen here lately, especially with the program I work with. We do like daddy daughter dance, or we do like donuts with dad, or we do like a son and father fishing, just different things like that. Just creating spaces for dads to hang out with their sons, spend some time with them. And even then, you know, just kind of practicing, you know, just being a dad, or creating spaces for men to be vulnerable with their sons and daughters, and just developing that relationship. So
I think that's right, Adrian. Mia, I want to speak to this one question in the chat, but also want to hear from you as a person in the field, for sure, as a professional. But the question was, don't hospitals treat the man at the birth as if he might be the father? And my only thing is that two people showed up. I absolutely believe that this is a special sacred place for mother and baby, but there's room for a partner. And my wife and I have been partners leading up to this. We'll be partners through it. And so I don't know what the hospital is told about who might be or who might not be, but this is what I would say. While the grandparents are out in the waiting room or whoever, there is that one person who starts off right by their side. And we just want to be seen in the moment for a moment. It can be, are you okay? It can be, this is what we're doing now, or this is what she said she wanted epidural, or whatever that is. It's just being cognizant of who we are in that space. And then we get some power. And it's not about me telling my wife, you need to tell them something, or the other piece is that doctors and nurses have the power and the care of our wife and child. So we're not going to get in the way. We're not going to, sorry, just not my way to ask them a bunch of questions when I need you to make sure you take care of them. And then, yes, ask me a question or tell me what's going on. And then, oh, by the way, I'm not going to take that time while my wife is there trying to give birth and say, can you tell them to talk to me? It's not the place or the time, not how I'm going to operate. And what I would share with you all is remember, I'm somebody who's been in the courtroom, whose job is to persuade people to believe, who's a negotiator, billion-dollar contracts and the like. But when I got in that room, whether it was for birthing, whether it was for a medical emergency, it was, I need you all as physicians and nurses to be able to help us through this. And so I'm not going to course correct your behavior unless they're at, my wife and child are at risk, but see us, right? And so Mia, I was curious, how does the hospital supposed to approach us, or is there a book on that?
Yeah, so we are actually doing a lot of work. I know, especially with my hospital and our partner, right, our Women and Infant Center, in making sure that we are asking, right? Because a lot of it is about communication. If you're in a situation, right, where someone is giving birth and there are people in the room, hey, who do you have with you today? Right? Who's going to go over with the baby? And so then we don't have room for confusion. There is no confusion about who that person is. I've already told you, right? And you treat them accordingly. I think that we have to do a better job of communicating and just moving out the way. Like, this is not about us, right? I know I'm busy. I got 10 births I got to go do, and I got to do this, and I got a chart, and that's all great and important. Who's in the room and who needs to be notified if things are going south? What, right? Getting that information, right? And having that information, making sure you transfer and translate that information to other people, I think is really important, because it really is a quick conversation, right? It's a quick conversation. So, yeah,
I
we
was
got
also
about,
gonna, I was
yeah,
also
go
going to
ahead.
say really quickly, though, that the elephant in the room, too, is that there is the assumption or the stereotype that Black fathers are malignant, uninvolved, uninterested, absent, problematic, criminals. So all of these things are coming in and are coming along with a discourse around medical care and medical protection of this Black woman. But the research says something else. And so I want to point out in the research that even though these stereotypes and ideas still penetrate and organize the way that hospitals and systems are organized, that when we look at the research, this is done by the CDC in the last 2 years, it says that Black men, more than white men and Hispanic men in their same economic cohorts and age cohorts, nurture, support, provide, and engage with their children across a range of activities and across a range of their children's lifespan than any of these other fathers. So part of this is a course correction. We've got to tell people this is not something new or out of the ordinary or exceptional. This is what Black communities do and have done and want to continue to do. And so we got to make space for that, right? And so some of that is unwriting and disassembling these problematic stereotypes so that we can then move forward in a positive and a really productive way, right? Because like we're saying, we trying to take care of mom and baby, and we got wires and stuff. We want to do all of that, but we can't. So we don't have time for all of y'all stereotypes and problematic histories around who we are and what we bring. I'm the dad. I'm the father.
We ain't got time.
So
we ain't got time for them. We ain't got time. I wanna ask, I'm a really quick, because then we got about 10 minutes left. So, a lot of what you're talking about, and I'm really glad that you said that, because I was like, I know he gonna get to it. I know he is, and I want him to get to it. A lot of the responses, I think, right? So, the way that you were there, right? And you came to the first appointment, and then you came to the second one, and they're like, well, what is he doing here? right? And how does that influence the way they even show up and treat you, right? I think about my own dad, and my dad, when my son was in the NICU, my dad would come and like check on me because I'm the baby girl, okay? He came to check on his baby girl, okay? And he's checking on his grandson, but more important, he's checking on his baby girl because I'm swimming and drowning, right? And well, who is this guy? I'm like, that's my dad. Oh, really? Like like it was a shock that I knew who my father was, right? So, but at a certain point, the way that people are responding to you may influence you. I'm not getting ready to go over there and deal with them people. Just let me know, babe, if you need me to come. Let me know if you need, because I'm not going to keep inviting myself into trauma. And I really want to Dr. Edmonds, if you could give us a little bit, just talk to me about trauma and how trauma really does influence behaviors that we might take the time to label as difficult in parents, difficult in fathers, or say like, oh, well, they just don't show up, they not engaged, they don't care, right? But we're not addressing the trauma that they have had to deal with that is making them say, I'm not going to put myself in that situation anymore. If y'all need something specific from me, let me know, but I'm not going to keep, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about trauma before we wrap up?
And I mean, I'll talk about this, and I want to, throw it back to the other brothers too. I always remind folks that when, Black men or any, folks that are part of marginalized and historically oppressed communities walk into these institutional spaces, we often talk about the hospital as a place of healing, as a place of collaborative and team-based interventions, right? To move a person from maybe a form of brokenness to wholeness. But for African-American men and for African-American communities, the hospital, just like the courtroom, just like the classroom, just like these other places that are supposed to be the icons and the real perennial models of the democratic system, often don't work for us, right? So therefore, when something that's supposed to be good for you over and over again turns out to be bad or leads to less than desirable outcomes, that can lead to having some kind of traumatic event, right? It leads to trauma in your life, so that when you walk into a school building, right, a good parent who wants to be there for their child or wants to be there for, someone in their family might be returning to a traumatic event that they had in that school building, right? Same thing with our hospitals, same thing with our courtrooms, right? David, you would know this, right? And so the trauma then leads us to then act in ways that can often be read as problematic or criminal, right? So all of a sudden, you got a brother raising his voice a little bit. You have somebody saying that we need an intervention, right? And so then all of a sudden, these kinds of things happen. I mean, there's a great study done by a group of pediatricians here in Indiana that said, and this is not surprising to anybody on this call, that the families that get called for hospital security interventions more often than anybody else, this is in the pediatric hospital, are Black and brown families, right? Every time. So the mother comes in, the baby's crying, or the dad is doing something, they're asking for additional help. So again, even in these spaces where you're trying to be a good and positive intervention, you're being read as criminal and problematic, and that leads to trauma. And then trauma leads to behavior that is often read as problematic or outside the boundaries of the norm, right? That's a trauma response, right? You cover your face, or you fight or flight, or you do things that look problematic, but these are a result of not problematic individuals, but of problematic institutions and histories that we've got to talk about, right? And so that's the research that I've had, that when you're talking to Black men over and over again, their concern about the state and institutions and other spaces they enter into is that they're going to have the same kind of violence or negative response that they have in other places, like with police or with other state officials, right? And so the hospital is not necessarily seen as a safe space. And so how do we change that? How do we think about that? How do we provide services to our brothers who are trying to do and be in the right place, but because of their histories, it's very difficult sometimes to be in those spaces.
Thank you. So I want to give everybody like a minute to give us a final thoughts or wrap up about this topic, about feeling erased, about erasure in general. Like, just give us a go around robin style. I just want to, give everybody a minute to finish us out. I'm gonna start with Mark with a C. That's Mark with a C.
I think we have to show up. We have to be present. We have to want to be there and be engaged in this process. I was in the room for the birth of both my kids. There is a certain decorum that's expected of us. And, we just have to learn to navigate those waters. It's tough. I think what would be great is if those institutions, Joseph, that you were talking about, provided us with kind of a roadmap of how to navigate, right? And how to engage, right? And have any of you ever gone in a hospital? And I remember this when I was a kid, like they had like orange dots that led you to this floor and blue dots that led you to this floor. So something of a roadmap to sort of help us help them, because they're trying to do a good job. They're bumping their head, but they do want to provide good care. But in the process, they say the wrong thing, they make the wrong assumption. Now I'm on edge, and that's how we have to try to figure out how to get rid of that and make sure that we're engaging in a way that's productive and it's not confrontational. They're not calling for security. Last thing, and I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. Do you guys remember Icky Woods? Icky Woods, when my son was in the hospital, Icky Woods' son died of I think it was he had a asthma attack. And man, the family, the chaos that ensued when they got to the hospital. Now, a lot of that is because of the grief and the outpouring of grief, but how it was handled, and then the police was called, and it just made a bad situation worse. And so, just like we're talking about with the police, maybe redirecting some resources around having professionals that know how to engage certain people, maybe there's an opportunity to say, how do we have the right type of counselors to engage people in a way that we can, mitigate some of these issues and prevent sort of the escalation of rhetoric, violence, tone, tenor, and so I get it, but it's hard. It is tough. There's no silver bullet.
David, how about you?
If I would very quickly, it would be for those of you that are parents and partners or soon to be parents and partners, wait your turn, but ask the question. The person you're waiting behind is the mother, but ask the question. Show up early, show up often. It's your right to be there. And for those medical professionals, what I would share is that see us, talk to us, and when we show our frustration, we are not a safety risk. So that's what I would say. And then just appreciate the time, everybody being here to learn. And then I'll kick it over to Adrian for you there, Mia.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. Yeah, one thing I guess I would say is us as fathers to keep showing up, to keep going. I think somebody put in the chat that, health professionals definitely want to help us, but definitely fathers, ask the questions. I think David shared that, when he's in some of those spaces where he kind of feels like, not really comfortable enough to ask those questions. I'm the same way, but, ask the questions, speak up for your wife or for your partner and your children, and to just keep showing up, being fathers. So.
How about you, Joseph?
I mean,
Anything?
I just agree with what everybody said. I also just look back, as a person who looks at history, and we have so many great examples of Black fathers and the history of our communities, in the history of the United States. I always remind my students that, like, in The Souls of Black Folk, which many of us has read, classic text, one of the chapters that W.E.B. Du Bois talks about is the passing of the firstborn, like the loss and the birth and the loss of his first child, right? And he talks about that traumatic moment. But I bring that up not only because of the trauma around it, but because he was reminding us as this amazing figure in, Black culture and Black history, that his fatherhood was something that was central and core to his identity. The same thing, just last or 2 years ago, we saw the amazing movie, King Richard, about the Williams sisters, and their dad. Again, another figure. And all of these folks are complicated and nuanced. And I think that that's one of the things I want us to walk away with this from, is that we are nuanced, we are complicated, we are, varied in our approaches, but we come with the desire to be good partners, good parents, and good folks in this whole situation and scenario of being fathers. And so I say, let's continue to build that community, talk to one another, and make space for those kinds of conversations, or these kinds of conversations.
I just want to say thank you to all of you all for showing up tonight and for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. I hope that everybody got to learn something, but more important than that, I hope that each one of you felt seen, heard, and valued in this space on tonight. I just want to say that I think that many of our institutions might have really good intentions, but we have to be held accountable to the impact, right? Because the impact of our behaviors and how we show up are detrimental to our Black fathers. They're detrimental to our fathers. They're detrimental to families. So we have to be accountable to the impact and not rest on what our intentions were in our spaces. And I will say that it is important for us to be aware, as medical professionals, teachers, anybody, the village, right? All of us who are providing that support to parents, of how we're showing up. But awareness without action is irresponsible, right? And so if we continue to treat fathers as, tangential characters in this space, then they're going to continue to show up that way, because that's how we're treating them. So we can't treat people as disposable and then wonder why they are acting disposable, right? And so I just want us to continue to think about that, continue to have conversations. And just thank you all again for making space tonight. Before we go, shout out to all the girl dads, all the dads in general, but I'm a daddy girl. So shout out to all the girl dads. Happy Father's Day, everybody, all the dads. You are honored and loved in this space. And thank you all. Have a great, great, great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. You're awesome.
Yes. Take care, all.
Does she want to stay on or anything?